Hikaru's playing Magnus, and he opens up with our old favourite, the Roy Lopez, named after J-Lo's uncle. Very few people know that. It's Norway chess, round 2. We've got some absolutely incredible chess to come here. Fasten your seatbelts. So Magnus plays pawn a6. This is classical time control. What happens if you take? Try and win a pawn. Well, in case you're new to chess, this is the trick. You win it straight back. No good. So we come back, the bishop drops back here. I mean, you can take, by the way, but then winning a pawn isn't the best. Then we see knight f6 played. You could castle here, but Hikaru goes for pawn d3. The bishop develops to the most aggressive diagonal, and keep your eye on that one. Star of the show here. Castles is played, pawn d6, c3, hints at setting up the old bathtub, but Magnus just castles. Says, do your worst. I've brought my armbands. Hikaru says no. He wants to go for some manoeuvring. The bishop preemptively drops back here, anticipating d4 later, and after pawn h3, taking control of g4 and the often overlooked i4, can't draw an arrow there, Magnus now voluntarily rotates that pony. We get rook e1 here, knight g6, and Hikaru goes on a pony journey of his own. He absolutely loves to practice with Fabi, with Ali Reza, for moments like this, and you could play pawn to c ships to support this push soon, but Magnus does it immediately. Has he just blundered? Because after takes, there's a pawn hanging. Well, no. If you take here, this is the trick. You get banged with bishop f2 check. And if takes, then there's queen f6 check, and you win an exchange. So we run back here, because actually this line is playable. You can go king h1 here, and when the smoke clears, white's actually got a centre, but black's got some good piece play, active bishops, computer gives it level, right? But Hikaru didn't want to go for that one. Instead, he plays the immediate pawn d4 for the score, but it's slightly imprecise. He's gone a bit wrong in the opening, because Magnus can now charge with the c pawn, kick back that one, and look at the expansion going on here. Faster than his haircut. The bishops now hit the long diagonals, and it's really dangerous for white. After pawn a4, Hikaru spending 30 minutes on that move, and the explosive c4. Look at their eyes open, scything down the key diagonals, plus a big clamp on this square, and again Hikaru goes into the tank here. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. What does he come up with? The incredibly stinky bishop to d2. I mean, that is not a pretty move. You shut down the queen, all the pieces on top of each other. Magnus now activates his queen here, connects the rooks, and Hikaru goes for a really ugly move of knight to d4, trying to blunt the bishop, saying, fine, take, leave me with a ruined structure, but at least I pick up this monster bishop. Magnus doesn't want any part of it. It was a decent move, but he plays an even better one before that knight can get too comfortable. Of course, you can't gobble here, or Magnus munches here. So queen g4 is played, activating, x-raying the king, supporting the centralized knight. Now we see rook a e8. Someone's about to get rook rolled. Rook a d1 played, and when you run this with the all-seeing, powerful Stockness monster, they want to play pawn b3. Take the space, slowly squeeze the opponent. But it's missed by Magnus. He gets a bit trigger happy here, still retains an advantage, but not quite as precise. He tries to win the queen, looks all over the room, hoping his opponent won't notice it, but Hikaru sees it. He's world number 2, and now the way to go here is keep the queens on the board. You then go for the whole boa constrictor thing. It gets deep, it gets computery, but Magnus slides out here. This queen exchanged offered again, and this time he goes for it. Now we know Magnus loves to play without the queens, but over these last few moves, he's just shed some advantage there. What was he played here? He goes knight e4, and it's fine, but we're back to a completely level game. The advantage he had is gone. Knight d2 hits the bishop, it drops back. Now we get this one stumbling backwards, and after an exchange of rooks, this game, I'm sad to say, is now headed in a fizzle out direction. The knight jumps, forks, this one's saved, then this one drops back here, and we're about to see an exchange of pawns, prisoners. So bishop e3 was played and draw agreed. Don't know who offered it, probably Hikaru. You usually have to make a move, offer a draw, right? How could the line have gone? Well, let's say like this and this and this. Here's one sample to show how the pawns could have been hoovered off. We're in a dead drawn game, right? What does it mean? We go to Armageddon. So let's jump here. Hikaru playing with white, and we get these moves. Bang, bang, bang. Both players build the banana hammock. Lots of symmetry here, making their coaches proud as they tuck those kings into bed on just move 5. A picture of harmony. And look at the clock times. Magnus is 3 minutes down because he just has to draw the game to get the points of a win. That's how Armageddon works here. So Hikaru pushing hard for the win. Explodes the board. No more symmetry. Don't set up the pawn cube, aka the pube. Not good for black. So Magnus does this. A kind of Neo Grunfeld defense. Now we get queen b3. Takes. No time to Botez gambit. Hikaru spots it. The bishop comes streaming out. All the pieces developing here. And after knight b6, queen b3, now we get some central action. Hitting the bishop, threatening to mangle the pawns. So this one's stepped into the middle there. And it invites f6, but not such a good move actually. Then it gets razor sharp with e4. All weird stuff going on. Here's a sample line, and white does emerge a bit better here. You know, something like this. So no f6 played. Magnus instead takes on c3. Good move. Also going to take here with check if you start trying to do this. So takes back was played, and now you could keep the bishops on the board. We see that idea from Hikaru in a moment, but instead we see bishop e4. Also a really common idea, but it allows the swap of the bishops. Good for white. Now we see king takes, rook ac1 played, and Magnus completely changes the character of the position. You know, could carry on some steady moves, but no, bang. Pushes forward with the juicer. Now you could play c4 as a decent response, but takes is played. Mangles the structure, but after knight d7, queen b4, covering the pawn, hitting the bishop, Hikaru saying fine, ugly structure, but how are you winning it back? I'm soon going to open up here as well. So Magnus now goes knight f6. Defends the bishop, abandons the immediate win back of the pawn, and he's just going for quick development. Bishop h3 played to stop the rook c8 stuff and centralise the knight without swapping the bishops. Queen c7 played. Knight d4, an absolute octopus that Stoctopus can be proud of here, and Magnus is like, right, let's go for it. Benko Gambit styley, pawn b6. So he gives the second pawn here. Idea being that after pawn recaptures, he's opened 2 lanes of attack there for the heavy pieces, big counterplay, and Hikaru burns oodles of noodles of time here. Finally goes queen b2 after like 2.5 to 3 minutes. Covers the pawn, which was attacked by the rook, but Magnus can now rook lift, whispers it of course. His position's coming together nicely, but how about this for an absolute thunderbolt from Hikaru Nakamura? Can you guess what he played? A tactical shot out of nowhere. The move he played here is bishop e6. I mean, one onlooker practically falls off his chair trying to guess the move on his live DGT board. It's that incredible. Idea being, if captures, the knight swooping in, you go to fork Vegas. That's a royal fork, family fork, no good. So Magnus goes here, anticipating the bounce back. Now e5, kicks that stallion from its outpost, drop into c2, and h5, excellent move. Trying to rip open the king. Knight e3 should be played, keeps an eye on knight g4 for example, but no. Hikaru whiplashes out with pawn h4, and it's a terrible move because Magnus has such a simple idea here. He should have invested some time. It's the most obvious attacking idea in the world as well, and it's simply queen c8 or queen d7. Bring the queen onto the light squares, bounce here, give checkmate in one of two ways. If f3, then obviously you crash through here, force that draw. And what to do? Best way to go is with king h2 because you stop the queen invading, but then there's check. And of course you've only got one square, then the knight comes back, renews the threat, and that's it. You play it to a draw. If you try and avoid that draw, let's say with knight e1, one of the top moves, queen h3, then knight f3, well, you've just got an absolutely terrible position. Huge attack ensues, you know, all this kind of craziness that I was clicking around with. Okay, this is just one line, but it gets truly awful for white. So that was the way to go, but completely missed. Magnus plays knight g4 instead. Wrong execution of the ideas. Hikaru now goes knight a3. They're not the most precise moves, but we're running with this blitz chess. And now Magnus, you'd think he was pushing for a win here, launches Gary the g-pawn down the board. Absolute insanity on the board here, but it's really a great move because after knight c4 hitting the rook, again, you could move that rook. Good move. Most people are playing that, but Magnus plays this. Pawn takes on h4, and it's just too much for Fabi. He's looking on in awe and amazement here at what's going on. f3 is now played in response. What happens by the way of takes the rook, well then you can take here and you just start ripping open the king. Say you save the knight, check once more, king's got no squares, so rook takes, and you slide the queen in. Again, you could have gone via d8. The idea is that you're heading here and down here. These kind of slow motion attacks. That one opened up the queen. Here's a sample line, you know, top engine line. Just one way the king can be ripped open, and black emerges doing very well. All the pieces playing in the attack. So let's run back here. We didn't see the rook captured. Hikaru tries for f3 as mentioned, but now check is played, and look at that. 3 pieces of Magnus's are hanging here. Absolutely incredible position. King h1 on the board, and again, these are 2 of the top moves. But Magnus here, he just blinks and goes wrong. He saves this bishop, but should carry on just ripping open the position. Again, I'm just going to briefly show a sample line. You give up so many pieces, but then start hunting the king with these ones. They're enough to actually drive it out, force these kind of incredible lines, plus bring the rook in. There's just too many attacking forces. Just one line I was clicking down right. There are so many. Too many to show right now. Magnus, though, drops back the bishop as mentioned, saying, fine, if you take my knight, well, you can't do so. Illegal move. So instead, Hikaru takes the rook, pawn recaptures, and now the best defense is queen d2 onto the dark squares, looking for a check. But instead, we see pawn e4. Hikaru's trying to blunt this bishop here, but there's a big problem. And it's this brilliant h takes on g3. And the problem now is that after captures, you can take here with check and nothing can stop the king's death except queen. You have to give it up. And of course, this is just completely lost. So we didn't see the knight captured. Bishop d5 intercepted. Takes. Pawn takes back. Knight e3 hits the rook. Saves itself. h4, I mean, look at these menacing ones rolling like space invaders. Pawn c4 from Hikaru, threatens to take there with check, and Magnus goes wrong here. f6 is his best, but he intercepts with the queen, loves himself an endgame. They're so low on time and they get no increment. It's old school chess. Takes is played, pawn recaptures, and the best way according to the engine is bring the rook, give an exchange, but not played. d6. It allows Magnus to march in with the king. He doesn't do so. He goes for the rook activation, looking for all sorts of craziness, but he's reminded that you can't have it all your own way as Hikaru challenges the file. Swapping the rooks is bad, as you can imagine, with pawns running, and this one then on its own to play against the knight. So this was played, but the rook should have gone to c8 to stop c5. Hikaru can now do it. Those ones running together as brothers. King f6 played, c6 on the board, brilliance. Magnus takes, the pawn pushes, he comes behind it, looks like he's got everything under control after Hikaru plays the only winning move. Rook g to c1, knight c4, but this is what Magnus has missed. Low on time, completely understandable. Hikaru's got a great tactic. Can you find the move here to finish the game? How's your puzzle rush? So the move to play, Hikaru finds it, slams down rook b6. What a move. If knight takes, not played, then you take here with check. King goes somewhere, and of course you take, make the queen, game over. And if you don't take like that, if you take with the rook played in the game, well then you make the queen. This is the trick, this is the tactic, and Magnus here resigned the game. Nothing to say, it's a queen versus a knight and a couple pawns, let's say, but it's overwhelmingly over. Exposed king, Magnus lets it go, plus he's got no time. He had 7 seconds left to make moves, no increment. So Hikaru takes that Armageddon, gets himself an extra point, is it? I think they get for the Armageddon wins. Hope you enjoyed that one. Do check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.